Brian Johnston, Public Policy and Communications Advisor. He has spent over 20 years as advocate for the mentally vulnerable, author of the book, Death as a Salesman.
And we're going to race through. We've got a lot to cover very, very quickly. And I have a timer here, and you'll hear it go off. And those of you who went to Catholic school know that if Sister is keeping time as well, we're going to stay on time. So we've got a lot to cover here. The theme, one of the sub-themes on your brochure has to do with advances, bioethics in light of advances in biology and medicine. I'm actually going to invert that because I want to talk about reversions, the reversion of ethics and the reversion of medicine, and its very present threat to us right now. We will end up talking, I'm so pleased about what Lilibeth said, and I was reminded of several things. I can't go into all of them, but we are going to talk about I was thirsty and you gave me drink. That's really the focus of what we want to talk about right now and how important that is. Literally where we stand right now, I'd say within 10 miles of us, there are people who are being dehydrated to death, and intentionally, not accidentally. This is something that if they had those essentials, they would live. Those essentials have been taken from them and they will die. This is a part of our culture right now, and it's something that the frogs, that's us, are in some very, very warm water. And as you know, the analogy about you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump out. But if you slowly heat that water up, the frog will stay there and cook. And that's how you get frog legs. So we live in a culture that's cooking right now. It's cooking when it comes to the value of the human life. And I want to talk a little bit about an aspect of that, what's been lost and why we have to understand it, why you have to understand it. One of the things that's been lost is the objectification of the human person. The sanctity of human life has been lost, and that was lost really with the loss of the Hippocratic Oath. Those of you familiar with the oath know that it says, I will give no deadly medicine, even if asked. And in like manner, I will not give a woman a pessary to perform an abortion. So the oath has always respected the role of the physician as one who is an advocate as well as a defender for the innocent, and was there to help, but never hurt the life that's entrusted to them. There's an outline, and I'm going to race through this outline. You have an outline in your syllabus there. I'm going to race through that. I think it's important to start here because of the role of medicine and the medicalization of killing. What we have, and I think that in the assisted suicide debate, it's Edward Alvarez, who is probably the most significant writer on suicide. He wrote in 1958 a book called The Savage God. And any of you interested in suicide should spend time in that book. It's not an upbeat book, but it's incredibly incisive. One of the things that Mr. Alvarez points out is that suicide is by definition something that we automatically recoil at. We are very uncomfortable with. He has a very important point he makes, though. In fact, I'm going to read it to you. The use of medicine, and I quote him here. By the way, this book is available out front. All of the books, and there's a documentary, and there's another Reagan book, Ronald Reagan's book he wrote in office. Those are all available. And those are going to benefit CNES. So if you get those books, that money is going towards California Nurses for Ethical Standards. At any rate, I read from the book. The use of medicine to assist suicide removes some of the natural psychological barriers to the act. Many who cannot bring themselves to the finality of self-slaughter because of its violence are more receptive to taking a pill without facing the full implications of the act. That was my background. And now I quote Alvarez. Modern drugs not only make suicide more or less painless, they have also made it seem magical. A man who takes a knife and deliberately slices across his throat is murdering himself. But swallowing sleeping pills, he seems not so much to be dying as merely seeking oblivion for a while. The psychological, and I pick up from there. The psychological barrier is even more dramatically removed if the suicidal act is actually done by another. How much more so if that other is a doctor who simply offers it as an alternative treatment. The physician's expertise would ease the trepidation of an otherwise reluctant patient. The nature of the Hippocratic Oath is so important not only to the medical profession but to our society, because this is the one member of society, the physician, who has committed their life to the protection and the health of other people, literally to their well-being. And the nature of the oath, I think, is a bit misunderstood. There is an article, I'll read from that article as well. It's written by Meg Gallagher, who is a pro-life person. She's a nurse. And she wrote when this assisted suicide debate was really hot in New York. She wrote in the New York Times, I'd like to quote her. She said, "Making it the responsibility of doctors to kill patients is a form of barbarism not seen since the Dark Ages, when barbers both cut hair and perform surgery, because both acts require the use of a knife. If we are no longer willing to protect the sanctity of all human beings, well, let us at least keep, as one small saving grace, the honor and dignity of the medical profession intact." And I think it's a valid observation that the honor of the profession should be intact. But I think the emphasis is misplaced and misunderstood. That the reason the oath is important is not because it makes doctors so special and honored. They are special. They are honored, and they should be. But the importance of the oath is this. The physician is the one person in society who has the most occasion, who is most capable, and can most easily cover the intentional killing of their patients. They're the ones with the most temptation. They're individuals that may want to cover up a botched medical procedure. They're individuals that really, if you know doctors, and I consider an honor to hear Alan Schumann again, just a good doctor, but every doctor I know is usually overworked, really overworked. And I could go on and on about that. Actually, there's a TV show. It's an interesting show. I'm not advocating it, but it shows House. It shows the nature of what a doctor does. And really, doctors very often they're detectives. They're trying to figure out what's wrong with their patient. They're doing all they can to bring an answer and bring an answer. And that can be very difficult. And I think the House TV show indicates that. By the way, I think he's modeled after Sherlock Holmes. I can't get into a lot of details there, but there are a lot of parallels if you're a Holmes fan. But the reality is the doctor is there to solve a problem, to come to the aid of their patient, and if need be, to never quit, to never quit. There is a time it is ethically acceptable for a doctor to say, and we remember the old black and white movies, where a doctor pulls off his rubber gloves and says, I've done all I can. He's in the hands of the man upstairs now. So it is ethically permissible for a physician to withdraw medical treatment, so to speak. That's ethically acceptable. But here's the problem when it is ethically acceptable for a doctor to use medicine to kill. Because the doctor is so committed, even good doctors may be tempted to bring an answer if this is considered to be ethical. So that's just one aspect of why the oath is so important. The oath is there because this is a member of society whom we have permitted to have this vast knowledge of the human person, to be able to, with their little finger if need be, to kill you with their little finger, to bring an end to your life, because they would know exactly what to do. And we've entrusted our lives to them. The reason the oath is there, and the reason it's something that you should care about, not just doctors. The oath is not a province of medicine. The Hippocratic Oath belongs to society. Let me explain why, and why I know when we were talking about this conference, it's very clear, even though the nurses are sponsoring it, it's designed for everybody. Everybody. Zanya made that point. Everybody should come to these kinds of conferences, should be equipped to understand the life and death decisions that are now on our plate as a culture. And the oath is that way too. The oath, actually, I'll read to you another quote. It's actually from a very well-known sociologist. And that is, well, in fact, I won't read it. I'll just paraphrase her. That's Margaret Mead. And you have it in your outline there. Margaret Mead says, "It is society's responsibility to protect the physician from such temptations." And in that article, she was talking about disabled children. She was talking about the elderly and the temptation that is before a physician to just clean things up. She points out it is society's responsibility. Society, if physicians are the ones who determine their own ethics, then all is lost. Think of it this way. There's two other members of society that we have given the knowledge and power to take life. The policemen. We actually give them weapons and empower them, if need be, to take a human life. But if police determine their own ethics, you are going to live in a police state. They are members of society that are subject to society standards. The other members of society are the military. And we actually train. I hope they're very good at what they do. But we as society have empowered them to take life. But if the military determines its own ethics, you will live in a military dictatorship. And the reality is, if Americans and if Western culture doesn't wake up to the fact that medical ethics belongs to society at large, to you and I, and we must be involved. If we don't wake up to that, then we will live in essentially a medical dictatorship, where those who have the power will use the power, and your concerns will be dismissed. And again, that's happening in many, many places. It needn't be, but it's because of the lack of knowledge and lack of involvement that happens. So I wanted you to understand that, how important it is that you be aware of this, that you be ready to face these issues. The issue of intentional dehydration of dependent patients is something that was made well known through the Schindler-Schiavo case. And I am good friends with Bobby Schindler. It's a great family. I applaud them. They're doing great work right now. And I suggest you support them. I am disappointed, though, and I want to tell you about my concerns about that particular case. Because unfortunately, even though it became there were actually acts of Congress that came out of that. The President of the United States weighed into that case. The problem with that case is this, is that unfortunately, in the minds of Joe Sixpack and Sally Soap Opera, it really became a he said, she said family squabble. And the real implications were lost, were buried in this family squabble. And that's very, very unfortunate. Because I think a much better case, and a case that really will crystallize the mind of Americans when they understand it, is the much more common situation where a bureaucracy, where a faceless machine, if you will, is the one making the determination that this human life should no longer live. Even though they're alive, even though they will, if cared for, continue to live, we will remove food and fluids because we don't think they should. That will galvanize Joe Sixpack and Sally Soap Opera. That will wake them up because they're Americans. They believe in the value. I think we are looking at a time, and Lily Beth got it exactly right. We live in an amazing country. It's an extraordinary country, I believe, in the history of mankind. But we're looking at a moment in time where the essential elements of this country, founded on the intrinsic value and worth of every individual, that those values will be lost unless we appeal to that in the American psyche, unless we motivate and educate and propel people into action on this. We're going to lose it. We're going to lose it, and we'll be like every other society that's gone before us, and some of the more tragic ones, the collectivist societies that we just recently have seen the fall of, will become just like those if we don't speak up and get involved. So that's the tragedy of Schindler's Schiavo. One of the things that you need to know is happening, and you can go ahead and look this up, the voluntary denial of food and fluids. Sometimes it's referred to with the acronym VDFF, or maybe VRFF, voluntary refusal of food and fluids. And they've actually reduced it, the more honest folks have reduced it to VDD, voluntary death by dehydration, is now being promoted in the New England Journal, in the various ethical journals. This has become a de rigueur part of healthcare. And again, it's predicated on the notion of voluntary, that this is voluntary, that this is what people want. And Lilybeth touched on it just slightly, and again, thank you for that, Lilybeth. The fact is, it's not. It's not. Think about Schindler's Schiavo just for a second, that it was according to Mr. Schiavo, the husband, he was actually invoking his wife's right to refusal. In a sense, he was invoking what is known as substituted judgment. This is a legal principle that is not necessarily in the code books. It's a legal principle that's there. And he was invoking that. She had wanted this, but she can't make the decision now. I, who have the authority to make decisions on her behalf, I would like to substitute judgment, but it's really because of what she wants. And it was being done in the name of autonomy, of her autonomy, and her right to self-determination was invoked to kill her. So the notion of voluntary is very much present, but it's the furthest thing from reality. Take another example. I know a name familiar to most of you, and that's Derek Humphrey. Derek Humphrey, in his book, Gene's Way, his first big book, he went on to write Final Exit, which literally is a cookbook guide. It's every possible way you could kill someone. And he goes through and he tells really neat stories of people who did it, emotional stories about why you should do it. And then this is how you do it. This is how you use the plastic bag. This is how you could use an oven. This is why you don't want to use a revolver. But he came to public attention when he talked about his wife's suicide, Gene's Way, and his assistance in that. And he's very clear as he talks about it, he's one of the preeminent advocates of assisted suicide, that after he had explained to her and got across that this is a good idea, she would, almost daily, she would ask, "Is this the day?" And he would say, "No, dear, this is not the day." And then she would ask again the next day, is this the day? No, dear, this is not the day. And then one day he realized it was the day. And he came to her and he said, this is the day. And it was a beautiful day. The clouds were scudding across the sky as he killed his wife. This is not about autonomy. It is not about voluntary notion. Again, what's deceptive is this. Think about it. Whenever you have, whether it be a physician-assisted suicide, whenever you have a setting that there are third parties involved, and there always is with the medically dependent, unless someone is literally committing suicide, and we can't do, if they're all alone, we can't stop them. But we're talking about third-party involvement, assisted suicide. We're talking about the intentional denial of nutrition and hydration. If someone says, look, I want to commit suicide. Look, I want to not take any more food and water because I want to have voluntary death by dehydration. I want to do that. You know what happens? Decent people, and it was, again, an excellent point. We live in a pro-life culture. Our culture is, in fact, pro-life. Up until just recently, you know what the response was by any third party? Well, what? No, let's talk about this. Up until just recently, if somebody goes to the top of a building and says, I'm going to jump, an agent of the state is empowered not to put a gun to their head or to push them, but to do whatever it takes to talk to them out of it. Because we recognize that society has an individual who's about to harm a member of society. So that policeman, that fireman, will do whatever it takes to counsel them, because we know that suicidal thoughts are the #1 indicator of depression. And so historically, even if someone has indicated their voluntary nature, their self-determination to do this particular act, whoever is around them has recognized this person has deeper needs. That person who I value, who lives inside this body, inside this glove. I was at a funeral, it's a great analogy. That we live inside the glove. This is the glove. We live inside. That person inside has issues and they need help. So the notion that as long as someone asks, it's okay to kill them, has not been long accepted. It has not been long accepted. It's a fairly recent cultural phenomenon. And if we don't address it, we are going to lose the very, very, very essential principle on which our nation is built, the intrinsic value and worth of every human life. And that's the reason that medicine is the way it is. I don't have enough time. The Hippocratic Oath, we could literally have a 3-day conference on the significance of the Hippocratic Oath. And I have to tell you, physicians are really a minor part of that debate. They're merely on the executing end. It's an issue for society. And until we see that, and unless we see that, we won't really win this fight. I do want to end quickly right now. There's several things that you can do to be involved right now. If you have not filled out an advance directive that has a presumption for life, you better. Because all the other directives out there, the boilerplates for the living will, they have a presumption of death, of non-treatment, of abandoning that person. So legal documents are very important, but they're not enough. Because even if you filled out an advance directive that is a protective directive, the will to live, which is the National Right to Life, there's several out there. I know Dr. Fortunasi has one, and they're very, very good. But even if you fill that out, did you know that because of the legal doctrine of substituted judgment, that's merely seen as a guideline? Did you know that? That's merely a guideline. It doesn't have to be followed. Did you know that? So be ready. If you really want to be effective, you need to fill out a durable power of attorney for health care. See, there's my alarm. See, I was putting you to sleep. A durable power of attorney for health care. Because what that does, and by the way, I gave extra time, so we're going to have time for questions too. What the durable power of attorney for health care does is you go to someone like Sister Paula, or someone you know understands what's at stake. And you fill out a legal document and you say that I give Sister Paula the durable power of attorney for health care should I be in a situation that requires a judgment that I can't give. Even if you filled out, now your legal document of the will to live will help guide Sister Paula. But you're going to need a fighter because the culture is already there. The culture is already at the place where the elderly, I was referring to nursing homes when I started off. I've been in many, many nursing homes. For those of you who have been to nursing homes, I know many of you have. It's a regular event to go to a nursing home and you will see usually gentlemen with a white ring around their mouth. Seen that? Spittle, dried spittle, very common in certain nursing homes. What that is, it's an indicator that person is very dehydrated. That literally their spit is that dry, it's sticky. Very common. And one of the problems is this, is that as we age, and I'm aging, as we age, our taste buds change. And that's the reason, as you get older, you tend to like spicier food. When you were 5 years old, you did not like a hot curry. You didn't like salsa, unless maybe you culturally got used to it. But as we get older, we want spicier foods because our taste buds are changing. We're losing our sense of taste. You're also losing your sense of thirst. So many people right now in nursing homes, in fact, many people right here, you and I, are probably somewhat dehydrated right now. And if anything, we might think we're hungry. And we mistake hunger pangs for our body's desire to get something in there, hydration. We need hydration. I'm not hydrated. So what you want to do is make sure that you have, and those people are dependent already, it's still, a lot of those people take a long time to dehydrate to death, even after that condition. But you want to have a protective directive. You want to have a durable power of attorney for health care, somebody who will fight for you. And then most important, because it's hard for those people to be at that, whether it be a critical care hospital or the nursing home, hard for them to be there all the time. You're really appealing to the conscience of the caregiver. And that's often nurses, but really in many situations, it's actually somebody who might have an 8th grade education, nurse's aide, somebody who's there changing the chucks. And sadly, there are some who feel that MD stands for minor deity. Not all doctors feel that. But if those with the authority have determined that, no, this is a no code, no, we're done here. Withdrawing nutrition and hydration has become de rigueur the method of care and treatment. We have reverted as a culture. So while the advances in bioethics and medicine are critically important that we understand, I think at its very heart we need to understand the basics, the very basics of life and caring for individuals and be ready to fight. And ultimately, if that caregiver, that person changing the chucks in that bed and turning that patient over, if they see that bracelet, they're going to hesitate. They're going to hesitate to take away food and water when they say specifically, I want food and water. And so it's that last line of defense. It's that last opportunity. There still will need to be an advocate that'll say, excuse me, doctor, but that isn't what is said in the documents. Someone needs to stand up. And if it's not you, who will it be?